It's 11 a.m. It's the QT Conversations, which is, it turns out, Qualified Tutors podcast. And here in the room with me today is Rosanna, MJ, and Jenna. Dee will be in shortly. She's just gone to find some stamps for her hubby. The reason why Qualified Tutor has a podcast is because we all have something to say. And when we get together, we tend to say things that are really quite fresh and interesting. So much so that Hannah, who's she works on the QT team, she just messaged me, Jenna, that something that you said last week about being gentle with yourself and sort of questioning the need to always tick off everything on your to-do list before you feel any value in your day, really resonated with her and helped her first day back after her holiday. And her to-do list was very long and she felt thoroughly overwhelmed. But part of her to-do list was to process last week's session. She heard you say that and it really, really helped. So I believe that these conversations are helping. Certainly, they're helping me. So yesterday, a new member of ours, the gorgeous, and she's not here today, which is so sad, Emily Justice, messaged me. She said, I'm reading your book and doing the course. She's been a member for a week. And she just got to the bit in the book, which I'm just about to read to you. She says, am I getting some neurodiversity vibes from the QT community? I'm like, uh-huh. Now, honestly, though, and seriously, before I read you this little bit, there's a reason, I believe, why a high propensity of tutors may have neurodiverse tendencies. And I think that will be interesting to unpack. So let me read you this little bit. This is from the beginning of chapter 8, which is workshop 5, barriers to learning, where I start talking about special educational needs, mental health and well-being. And I say, at 43 years old, it occurred to me that I might have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I'd been struggling to organize my time, manage my daily life, and regulate my emotions. I'd worked so hard that I'd burned out. I was depleted and struggling with depression and anxiety. At my lowest, I lay in bed at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. Texting my friend Jack, I wrote, I think I broke my brain. That's really what it felt like. An assessment confirmed that I do fit the ADHD profile. That was when I learned to ask for help. Like wiping away steam from a bathroom mirror, I could suddenly see myself more clearly. My children have a mother who will read them endless stories, dance around the kitchen, and cuddle them for hours. But never, not once, have we practiced times tables or spellings. Raising 5 children I can do, but signing their homework books is sheer agony. Exploring the ADHD literature was bemusing at first. Surely everyone struggles in these ways. Surely this was the universal human experience. And then I realized it was because I spend so much of my time with people who are like me. Those of us who love tutoring tend to be restless, sensitive, intuitive, and enthusiastic. We don't love crowds, but we do love people. We get stuck in our own heads and down rabbit holes. We are perfectly imperfect, and so are the students with whom we work. Thanks, love. I would love to hear what your thoughts are.
I think that perfectly sums us all up.
Should we go now? We're finished.
I think it's a mic drop.
When I had my informal autism, not diagnosis, but a doctor picked up on it, it's exactly that. Suddenly, the whole of my early part of my life made complete sense. It didn't change anything other than my own ability to accept all that stuff that had gone on, that there was nothing wrong with me. It was because of the way I was put together.
The difference between a label and having a diagnosis, it's not just a label.
Go on.
It's who we are, and it gives us understanding and almost permission to be kind to ourselves and to accept ourselves as we are for who we are, and not spend all of our time and energy, and for those of you familiar with it, spoons, fighting to be something that we're not, and damaging ourselves and everyone around us to be who we're not.
And therefore, is tutoring suited to our particular? Well, no, sorry. We've taken 4 steps too far into this conversation. Rosanna and MJ, before we go forward, I'd just love to hear what your initial thoughts are.
I really related when you read that bit out about going through the symptoms and thinking, surely everyone has this. Because, again, it might just be me spending a lot of time with people who are similar to me, but I don't know. I mean, I think I'm coming at it from a bit of a different angle because I haven't had any official diagnosis of anything, but maybe I fit the profile. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because I see a lot of things on Instagram, TikTok, stuff like that. And it's like, if you've got these things, you've got ADHD. And I look at it and I'm like, surely everyone has that. Like, just to give a simple example, there was one the other day that I heard, and it was like, you clean your house when it's just you there, but you clean it loads more when people come over. And I was like, surely that's everyone though. Like, I genuinely don't know anyone that doesn't apply to. So sometimes when I look at it, I'm like, maybe I have it, but then I'm like, surely this genuinely is stuff that everybody.
I think that's really, really cool. That's exactly where I wanted to spend most of this conversation. MJ, what are your thoughts?
I'm not going to start with ADHD, okay? In my previous life, I had a lot of profiles done, and one of them was the Myers-Briggs. And I won't go into the details of it, but a summary of it is my profile is, dear God, please help me think of, oh, look, there's a bird, one thing at a time. My youngest is training to be a social worker. And she said, God, Mum, you are so ADHD. I am renowned for digressing. But the house, you just don't want to know what it looks like. I am the untidiest person that I've known, except my eldest daughter is even worse. So we start a job, we see it, we start it, we don't finish it because we see another job. Now, as far as tutoring is concerned, because I have to concentrate on the student, it is the only time that I allow myself not to digress. Although that doesn't stop me sometimes, because when last night I was tutoring a student that I know very well. He's great. He's followed me from GCSE into A level, which I've never taught before, but anyway. And I see something about Elton John saying the worst thing that everybody could have done was legalize cannabis. And of course, so I do get those little snippets in. But then once they get to know me, students realize that I've got a very good sense of humor. But it sometimes takes about 3 months. In fact, it takes most people about 3 months to realize, to break through the barrier. And then they're with me for life.
I've definitely had that with you, MJ. I am just, the more I get to know you, the more I realize how funny you are. So I definitely relate to that. I just wanted to pull back to Mum, you're so ADHD. So I have very switched on teenagers. My 15 and my 16, no, he's actually 17 now, would pull me up for that, because ADHD is not an adjective, they say. Which I think is really interesting, and it's a really interesting thing to be protective of. Jenna, what are your thoughts on that? Because we've spoken about careful language quite a lot.
Sorry, I was just replying to people in the chat. I checked a word in there, scurryfunging.
Funging.
It's one of my favourite words.
Sorry, I want to hear it in your accent. I spoke over you.
Scurryfunging.
There's a little in there.
I have such a strange accent now.
You do.
One of the joys of ADHD is the way a lot of us pick up and mirror accents.
Mirror.
And actually, you mentioning language kind of ties into that, because one of the things that's really, really
Is that an
common-
ADHD thing?
That's an ADHD thing.
Okay, so let's stop then. ADHD characteristics, and I do want to keep ASD in this conversation because I want to be inclusive in our conversation about inclusion.
Are you talking about ASD?
We're talking about all the things. Okay,
I haven't got any
hold on,
traits
hold
of
on,
that.
hold on,
Yeah,
hold on. I feel like I need a lasso today. Okay, so Rosanna said, surely everyone. Let's just sit with that for a second. So, and I get too personal in these sessions. So I asked my psychiatrist whether he wanted to put me on ADHD medication. And he said, the ADHD definition has become so broad in recent years that I don't believe you'd have passed it 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I'm not convinced that it is a useful definition for you. And I think that's really important. I also know, and I can't reach the book right now because of the building works, but there is a wonderful book called ADHD 2.0. And could somebody please find it and link it to me, because I want to reference the authors. In there, they talk about a type of ADHD that is actually caused by our lifestyles. Now, I am way too involved in my phone at the moment. I can't even look at the screen time app that I downloaded because it would be absurd how much time I spend looking at my phone. And as you know, I don't even touch social media. So I don't even know what it is, but how much of this have we done to ourselves? I live myself at a specific level of chaos with 5 kids and a dog and building works and running this bonkers business is actually my optimal level of chaos that we were talking about last week. And if it gets a little bit more, I crash. And if it gets a little bit less, I crash. How much of this did I do to myself is my question. Jenna, I can see it. Come on, go.
So I am trying to not.
Thank you.
This is a lot of different things. So my area of specialism in tutoring in education and wider is neurodiversity.
Yes.
And there are lots, and for me, neurodiversity and that side of neuroscience and developmental sciences and learning sciences are my special interests. It's why I do what I do the way that I do it in every which way, and it is every part of me. And I am conscious of this isn't, I know. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. And I think that there are so many conversations here. But I think that one thing that is probably worth us coming back to is some of the language that we're agreeing to use and wanting to use and defining.
Nice.
Because you mentioned that before. And I think that there is so many different interpretations of things, and things are experienced and talked about so differently, not just between age groups or regional areas or settings, but across the world and even within groups.
Yeah.
And I think that there are lots of ways of talking about these and exploring these issues and answering these questions in a way that encompasses all areas. And I'm not always the best at wording stuff out in the wild.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that I always find really important in these conversations is that, yes, neurotypical people experience some of these. The difference is the extent, the complexity, the how core and how various, and the specific presentations of these things.
I think that's right. And helpful.
Because a lot of things like forgetfulness or the spacing out or the hyper focusing or the only being able to focus on things you're interested in or the thriving in chaos stuff is often, well, yeah, neurotypical people do have these things. They do experience these things, but it isn't the core of who they are. It's an experience. For neurodivergent people, it is literally clinically who we are.
I was thinking about this yesterday in the terms of the difference between chronic fatigue and feeling tired.
There's a really interesting podcast I listened to literally the other day about this that pulled together some of the recent science around the links between chronic fatigue, ME, and neurodiversities. And it's really fascinating. And there is specific type of fatigue that is coming out in research to be connected specifically to neurodiversity that is separate from autistic or ADHD burnout, and ADHD is a separate profile as well. And the overlaps there are really, really interesting.
Fantastic. And I actually wanted to say one more thing before. Rosanna, I'm coming to you next, if that's okay with you. I think it's really, really powerful that we are such a healthy community that we're able to have this conversation because it's so loaded, because there's so much personal and professional expertise in the room. It could easily be a minefield. And I think this time last year, I wouldn't have dared have this conversation. But I think it's really,
why not, Julia?
Because it's a minefield, because there's so much sensitivity in the space, and because the language is so complex and sometimes imprecise, and because I never would want to make anybody feel uncomfortable or judged, and I wouldn't want to misspeak. And just the care that surrounds all of that would make me feel scared to open the conversation. But I know that in this group of people, if I misspeak, you will respectfully correct me. And that actually makes me safe enough to explore with you. Rosanna, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree that it can be quite a loaded thing. And I think Jenna's right. There's so many different perspectives on it. And it probably is more about the extent to which it affects somebody rather than just looking and be like, oh, you have this, therefore you've got ADHD. I think as well, I've heard so many different things about its origins and treatment. And that's also very loaded as well. So, for example, there's a book, some of you might have heard of it, Gabor Mate's Scattered Minds.
Yeah.
And he talks about it being something that is not inherited, it's reversible, it's a developmental delay. I've heard other perspectives, mostly from psychotherapists, who say it's the product of growing up in a chaotic household. So it's like, well, how do you define that? And then obviously there's the risk of kind of parents feeling like, oh, is it my fault my kids turned out this way? Which is obviously a whole other thing. It must be really, really difficult to navigate as well.
But the answer is always yes, by the way. And no.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because obviously, yeah, there's never the intention of a parent to have their child, like messed up in some way. And not that it is messed up, right? It's just the perspectives on it and stuff and kind of pathologizing things. I've heard a lot of people say, like, I spoke to a specialist a couple of years ago. She said it gets misdiagnosed all the time. And a lot of the time, you look at, for example, I'm using like a generalization here based on what I've heard, but a lot of people say like it's pathologized in young boys who are a bit restless. And we live, like you were saying about the society that we live in, where we're all addicted to our phones and we're in school, kids are in school 8 hours a day, they're expected to sit and just focus on one thing at a time. It's not really geared towards where you are developmentally at that point. So if a child is a bit restless, that's completely normal. It doesn't need to be kind of treated as something that's a medical issue necessarily, right? So there's so many things in it that are tricky. And I really liked the analogy actually between the difference between being tired and having chronic fatigue. It's a little bit like depression versus sadness, that kind of thing. Like I think you can use that same analogy. it's about like Jenna said, the extent to which it affects you, and the idea that it's actually something that's part of you rather than just an experience that you have. So,
and certainly with depression, part of the analysis would be something about persistence, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and even people that are specialists in that admit that it's not a hard and fast thing in terms of diagnosis. Like, I think it's meant to be that you have the symptoms for more than 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. But it's like, how much of that is caused by your situation, or is it a chemical imbalance? I feel like a lot of those conversations apply to ADHD as well as to depression and other things as well.
Yeah. Talking about the medication, and MJ, I'm coming to you next if you don't mind. Talking about the medication. So my 12-year-old has just started with ADHD meds, and 5 weeks in, we are already those parents who, the minute he starts getting bouncy, we say to him, "Did you take your meds?" And it's funny, not funny, because all of a sudden, you know, like, I'm sure I've shared with you before that the first 10 years of parenting, I raised my children with no TV whatsoever. And so the idea of, you know, screen as the silent babysitter, you know, was a thing. And now it's almost like the ADHD meds has become one of those of, you know, all of a sudden the medication is part of my parenting toolbox, or instead of some of my parenting tools. And I feel really uncomfortable with where "have you taken your meds" is sitting between me and my son right now. Jenna, your face is so fun to read. MJ, what are your thoughts? No, first unmute and then tell us your thoughts.
Something came across it. What, on ASD?
Well, no, yes, well, on any of it really, because you put in the chat just now, blame the food industry, which I think was, you know, a really interesting curveball. We're talking about how society is affecting our, you know, mental resilience, and I think that's interesting also.
Well, first of all, I have to take antidepressants, and I've been taking them for decades, and I'm not taking them. So I have no issue with it. If somebody else has an issue with it, it's their problem. So I have reactive depression, which is why when the car went, I went down. I bought another one yesterday, and I'm taking the other one to court.
Lovely.
So that's why I'm starting to feel up again. ASD, and I've done an in-depth literature review when I did my master's on ASD. So I don't have any of the traits because I'm too chaotic, and I drive most ASD students mad because I don't line anything up. But when I was in the classroom, I did. I had to, you know, top to bottom, left to right, all of those kind of things. Yeah, I do blame the food industry, and I wouldn't have said that 30 years ago. Can she still hear me? She's not interested. Where are you? Yeah, the food industry. Food industry is a major contributing factor. I did a degree in food science. I'm very old. I qualify for a bus pass, and I've got a pension. Yeah. How long have you got? So do some research on what happened to maize, the glut of maize, in the 50s, the advertising strategy on cereals, and what brick margarine happened. And then you'll find, and the fact that we actually don't need to eat 3 meals a day.
There is a book, isn't there, about processed food at the moment that I've been avoiding reading, but maybe I shall dare.
Yeah.
Dee, tell us about socks. I said socks.
Socks, yes. Yeah, I've always been bemused by people who they seem to always have, you know, they're talking about odd socks, that they end
Odd
up with
socks.
this drawer full of odd socks.
My children only wear odd socks, Dee.
Yeah, but you know, I've lived in a number of households with washing machines and tumble dryers and things, and I have never, ever, ever lost a sock. So what does
Now that was a mic drop.
So
Go on,
is
Jenna.
is there something inherently wrong with me that means that I've never
No, maybe
lost
your socks really like to stick around. Maybe.
Please, can I come in and tell a story
Yes.
about that?
Yes, we're talking about socks.
Right, it is about socks. It speaks volumes, Steve. Okay, I lived in South Africa. I had a maid that they used to have a little thing where they would misplace a sock on purpose. So you would actually say, oh, okay, that sock. I've only got one sock. I'll get rid of it. So they ended up with having two pairs of socks, and you were none the wiser. So when we came over here, I said, right, well, we won't have any odd socks because nobody's pinching them. We have more odd socks than we ever had in South Africa. And I don't know where they disappear to. So hats off to you, Dee, for actually managed to keep your socks.
That was a complicated and loaded example that I'm not going to explore, if you'll forgive me, because of the low trust nature of that relationship. But it did remind me of Dobby for a moment there. Jenna, are your socks matching?
Yes.
Okay. Are they Christmas themed socks?
No, I don't own any Christmas themed socks anymore because they're usually really what I call spicy. You can feel the seams everywhere in like novelty socks. It's so painful.
Okay, sorry, let's unpack this. So you're pointing to sensory needs for, and I know exactly what I'm feeling my right foot right now. You're saying that feeling the seam of your sock, if a sock is made more for its design than for its quality.
Specifically the spicy seams. I'm not
Okay, unpick spicy for us because we're not talking about tasting them.
One of the things I love about neurodiversity, especially those on the ADHD side, are the words we come up with, because we don't really have the right words for stuff. But also one of the things is the way that our brains connect specific words to what we mean. It's fascinating looking at the fMRI studies into this. But when I use the word spicy, I mean it in a really specific but general way. So it's like the way that spice, as in capsaicin type spice, feels. It is stabby and burny and crunchy and sharp.
That was beautifully articulated. So in the same way that spicy things are stabby and burny and sharp, that's what it feels on your skin. Beautiful. Rosanna, you want to discuss socks, or are you ready to move on?
I think a lot of people can relate to having a wardrobe. So it's probably what's going on with me, I think, with my socks.
Chair robes until they fall.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a chair in the room, which is probably an issue. Maybe I should invest in one. It's just one of my habits, I suppose, but I can't be bothered to move the bed out because it's heavy and whatnot.
I happen to live with a person who believes that he is the last neurotypical person that he knows, certainly in the family. I would suggest that he's probably self-regulating enough to be on the ASD end of the scale, but I wouldn't dare diagnose. But you can just imagine what the bedroom of a highly self-regulating and me person looks like.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things. It's just, I feel like sometimes my physical environment is a manifestation of what's in my mind. I actually had this with a friend of mine once who just refused to clean a bowl for like weeks at university, and I offered to clean it for her and everything, and she was like, no, I'm gonna do it. And then it ended up the bowl was thrown in the bin after like 12 weeks or something, and we've now come to realize that the bowl was a symbol.
The bowl was a symbol.
The bowl was a symbol, and we talk about it regularly, even though this happened about 10 years ago. So I do feel like, they say, don't they, tidy space, tidy mind and stuff like that. So I feel like there's some truth in that, to be honest.
Absolutely. And that's really interesting because I often judge myself for you know, tidy space, tidy mind is a really judgmental phrase that also feels true.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
the
don't quite
thing.
know how I feel about it.
Well, I think it can come across a bit judgy, but I feel like it's one of those things. Again, I keep thinking about depression as an analogy for some reason, but it's kind of like when people say, oh, if you're depressed, just go out. And it's like, but I would go out if I wasn't depressed. You know what I mean? So you're in a bit of a catch-22. And I feel
Stop
like,
eating.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it feels like it kind of works both ways, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to get my thoughts straight on it. But it's sort of like, yeah, if I was feeling good, I would have a tidy space, but I'm clearly not. So that's why partly it's gotten to that level. But also it's sometimes like you do actually have to do it in order to feel better. But it's like sometimes it's really hard to pull yourself out of that and just do it. Like I do feel better when I tidy. I feel like my life is more organized, even if it is just a bit of an illusion. But sometimes it's really difficult to get to that point where you can actually
I actually
do it.
used
So
to do it at the end of term. So at the beginning of the school holidays, I used to tidy all the cupboards, and that felt like the best self-care.
Yeah, it can, and I feel so much better after I've done a tidy and a clean. But again, it's I wouldn't want to beat myself up if I can't do it all the time, because it is obviously an ongoing thing. Like it's not like you tidy and then right, that's it now, I'm fine. Like the next day it can just get messy
when you
again.
do housework,
then
everything's done, right? And it just stays done.
Well, yeah, exactly. I always think like, oh, why do I have to clean again? I cleaned the house really thoroughly last week. Like, why do I have to do it
Shoveling
again?
snow in a snowstorm. But you know what? We've been speaking before about perfectionism and about process. And if we really appreciated process better, we wouldn't wait for that moment where it's done to feel good about ourselves. But hold on a second. I want to segue. Hold on. So you said floordrobe. I said chairdrobe. Jenna found a link. Okay. Anybody who's watching this, please follow the link to chairdrobe.co.uk and you will find.
It looks really nice.
I'm actually going to share screen. I'm going to share screen for the sake of YouTube. Hold on. I can do this. Right. So, and I do have a point here. I do have a point, but first I have to share this because it's awesome. So a chairdrobe, and I'm curious to know what the woman's chairdrobe is like, if it's different from this. But look, it's got. Is it really? If it has lipstick, I'm going to be really annoyed. It has hanging bits on the back. Yes, I do that and do need that. I think I saw a remote control section on the side there. And basically it just sort of makes you feel like an absolute king whilst being a... Go on, Jenna.
This is the first one that came up when I Googled it. But so I have designed one. As I do.
Of course you have.
To at some point actually take some time off work and build some stuff again.
You should. I think you should. With your lathe.
Yes, I am. I have a design for building a powerless lathe as well. But in the meantime, the other day I came across a really lovely one on TikTok that was a little bit more functional as a chair as well.
Okay.
Not that I'm sure they ever get used as actual chairs, but it had like like a bar that swung out, and it was like really nice and neat, and it was a little bit more on the minimalist style, so it didn't like have all the hooks and that. So you just kind of chuck it over the rung type thing.
So the point of bringing that that brilliant thing to you is firstly thinking about how we are communicating in this conversation, that on the one hand we're having an intimate conversation here, and on the other hand we know that it's also live streamed to YouTube and LinkedIn and will go to Spotify and is our podcast. Interesting the layers of private and public that we're engaging with there. And then at the same time, as well as talking with each other and following each other's visual cues, we're also having this double chat in the chat function where we're bringing links from other things and definitions, and MJ found a screenshot of the book that I referenced, and all of those layers mean that we're all engaged and nobody's doing that thing. I don't know, do you remember swimming lessons where 4 children waited by the side whilst one child got dragged up and down? Yeah, and you see that in PE lessons as well, don't you? One child has a go with the racket and everybody else has to wait. Well, none of us in this room are willing to do that. That's not what learning feels like or participating feels like anymore. So we need these layers and layers of communication in order to keep ourselves engaged and make best use of our time. And then one more thing. So during COVID, WhatsApp and social media went mad, didn't it? And there were those memes that came through. There was one about a woman was making a phone call. She was looking for somebody to take on a job, and the job was a full-time position. I've mentioned this to you before, of reading and managing the emails that were coming through from her children's schools. Yes, it's a full-time job, was the joke she made, right? For me, it was really, really helpful seeing that, because it normalized my experience. The joke about banana bread feeling like a great idea in the first lockdown, and a fluming, you want a banana bread? Here's a banana, and here's the bread in the second lockdown, told me that everybody was having, that other people could relate to that experience of novelty's worn off now. Yeah, this isn't cute anymore. I think what I'm pointing to is that because of connectivity, because of the internet, because of these memes, in addition to they're probably causing half of the problems, they're definitely making us feel reassured. And it's not just me going through this shared experience. Thoughts?
They're also solving them. They're also improving accessibility and engagement. And part of why we're having multiple conversations at the same time.
And you really are. It's hilarious.
It's brilliant. And we are actively engaging in all of them at the same time. Many neurotypical people, not all, because it's never all.
Yes.
Many of us do best in communication when we're having multiple conversations at the same time.
Definitely.
We are using different bits of us that need to be engaged at all times. It's the same way that kid at the back of the classroom messing about can recite back to you every single word you just said.
Or even better, actually understood it.
And can apply it. But if you make them sit there with their butt glued to that chair, their hands still, looking at you, the only things in their brain repeatedly are must look at teacher, must sit still, must keep hands still. There is nothing else they can do.
Yeah.
And that is something that I was talking about recently with someone. Those things are constantly recited to us as preparing children for the workplace. However, this is our workplace right now, and we are thriving with so many different conversations at the same time that are stimulating different things and help us keep on track. Because I've noticed a difference, like the way that we've used chat over the last year has evolved.
It has.
And the way that we reference chat and the way that you chair and reference chat has changed over that. And we use it so much more dynamically and so much more. And we stay on point more, we expand more. It gives its own natural agenda.
Love that. Love all of that. Thoughts? Come on, MJD, I've not heard from you for a while.
I've been looking at the chat. Rosanna said something. So if you're doing something online, okay, if I'm tutoring, then my focus is on the person, but I'm often searching for other things that can add to the session. If I'm listening, I often need to do something else at the same time. And I knit, and I need to do that more. So I went to a fair on Saturday, saw some stuff. Okay, and I thought, right, stop knitting all these jumpers, and start knitting Christmas socks, because it's going to take you an hour to do something that costs £15, and you don't have to think about it. So when I can, that's what I do. Anyway, it helps me concentrate.
I tell you what you're making me think of. My 12-year-old, who you hear a lot about at the moment, has fallen into hammer beads and loom bands at the moment, so much so that he's also learning to iron, not very successfully because these are now stuck. But Mummy, what shall I make for you next? Is is the thing. So he made me an Elmer the Patchwork Elephant, which was so yum because I collect those. So and at the same time he's listening to stand-up comedy, and we hear him laughing out loud. Obviously, they're not entirely appropriate, which is a different conversation. So so something about understanding yourself well enough to know how to keep your hands busy if you're needing to concentrate. And for me, it's often the other way around as well. If I'm doing tasks in the house, laundry or cooking, for example, I will very often have an audiobook on at the same time. I tend to find audiobooks much better for me than podcasts. Because there's something about the continuity. They're sort of, they feel, I feel like I, have a sense of place in them, maybe. But does that resonate? So and that I recorded my audiobook this week. So that was just a really lovely sort of cyclic moment of participating in that ability to access content in the way that you need. So Emma Harper said to me, I'm not buying your book because I can't read it, but as soon as the audiobook's out, I'm there. And I think that's what I wanted to talk about for the last 12 minutes, if you don't mind. I want to talk about how safe and comfortable we are to express our needs. I was going to say nowadays, but I'm not sure that nowadays is even the right phrase. But certainly here, we're able to say, this is what makes me comfortable. This is what works for me. Dee.
I'm certainly a lot more comfortable with that. And I think that's because I've had to become more aware of what my students need.
Nice.
So if I'm having to take that on board, why aren't my needs also important?
Nice. We are just as important as our children is a big statement. It's a huge, huge thing to know. So many of us are much more willing to give to others than to ourselves. Rosanna, what are your thoughts? I'm fiddling with this now.
I'm just laughing a bit because you asked this question of nowadays, how comfortable are we to express our needs? And I feel like nowadays I don't care, if I tell people stuff like I had no hesitation saying that thing, but I have to have something on to listen to. But I have had the mick taken out of me in the past, which I quite like. I think it's quite funny. But for example, when I was at uni, my study process, this is going to sound a bit crazy, but whatever. I'd be sat on the floor in my room and I'd have all my revision notes stuck on the wall. And it looked a little bit like, in a TV show when they're trying to solve a crime and you've got the crime board, like that's what my room looked like. But I'd be listening to Kate Bush. And I remember people came in and they were like, how can you study like this? This is insane.
I'd say you probably actually look like a psycho.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I
because
did.
Because of the Kate Bush. Like if it was
exactly.
I'd be fine with it. But there's something.
I know, it's like Wuthering Heights and then all these notes stuck to the wall. So people thought I was a bit crazy. Then I had the mick taken out of me for listening to like new age calming music. They were like, why are you listening to this whale music?
Whale
and I was
song.
like, I was like, it's not whale music, blah, blah, blah.
It was before Spotify, so you had what you had.
Exactly. It was a CD my parents bought me, so it tells you how long ago this was. And I remember when I was at work, I worked in sales, but I was sending emails and I'd always have to listen to something. I remember my headphones came up once. This is so random. I was listening to the soundtrack of 101 Dalmatians, the live action version.
And then, by the way, is completely weird.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm with you on that.
The second one is so bizarre.
Yeah, definitely. But the people turn around to me, they're like, why are you listening to circus music? And I was like, no, it's not circus music, it's a soundtrack. So I've definitely kind of had experience where people have looked at me like, what is wrong with you? You're so strange. But I don't, it doesn't bother me because I think it's quite funny, to be honest.
Goodness me.
I'm celebrating my needs just to not care. Which is why I now live in dungarees. I'm nearly 60 and I don't care. I mean, I'm not wearing them today simply because I had to go out and have my legs waxed, but that's another story.
Now
too many clothes to take off. But yeah, I have seriously got to the point where I don't care.
You're not harming anyone, are you? So why should you care? You're doing what's right for you.
And I mean, my PT said to me yesterday, can I ask you a personal question? I went, yes. He said, you don't shave your underarms, do you? I went, no. Why not? I said, well, why should I? Is for one thing. And secondly, I really can't be bothered. And thirdly, I've had them waxed so much, there's actually not a lot of hair there. But then on a podcast, Oh, yeah, Problem Squared. And they brought up a book about how this whole thing about why women strip hair, where that came from. And it didn't come from where I expected it.
Go on. Is it not the same as why women don't have pockets?
Mm, I don't know. But apparently it originally came from um, quite a while ago off the back of Charles Darwin and the kind of racial superiority thing that came out of natural selection and things. And it was the not brown, not black part of the population wanting to differentiate themselves from that part of the population, and that's why the women strip their hair.
Goodness me, what a
And then
beautifully
when women
articulated thing.
started
Yeah.
working, that's when the marketing thing kicked in, that women, now they were doing similar stuff to men, still needed to do stuff that made them different.
Wow. So
And there's a book which I need to find and put on the skyscraper of books.
Oh, okay, fine. But also put the link in it so that we can lose it in the
When I
WhatsApp as well.
find it, I will spread the word. But it's
Awesome.
fascinating.
India Ari, who I really like listening to, has a lyric, sometimes I shave my legs and sometimes I don't. And the first time I heard that, I can't even tell you how helpful I found it. Really helpful. So thank you for bringing hair removal into the conversation. I was really touched by what Rosanna said, and I really want to finish on this. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about it also. Rosanna said people thought I was a bit strange, but now I don't care. And we started off by saying, you know, like wiping steam away from the mirror, I was able to see myself more clearly. And we know that the students that we work with, we are so deeply committed to making them feel enough. And part of that is the work that we do in making us feel like we're enough. And that's actually a step further, I would suggest, than I don't care. I never let my children say, I don't care. I let them say, I don't mind, but I never tolerate them saying, I don't care. Because actually, Rosanna, I do care that your best way of studying is like a psychopath. I do care that your best way of studying is with your resources laid out visually in front of you, all able to be seen at the same time, which is fascinating. And that you need the stimulation of familiar music. I would love to know whether you ever found out what the whales were saying. But I really, really feel like there's something really powerful in caring about our differences and yeah, something about the comfort that we've discussed in recent weeks about mitts and spicy socks. I haven't really said anything, but I've asked them sort of, put some stuff out there. MJ, what are your thoughts?
What on whether I
I
care?
don't know. What do you think?
I just care about my children. I don't care what people think of me. I know I'm eccentric, and I have to get over the 3 months before people realise that I'm funny. So I haven't been going to my networking group before because of the car, and I thought about joining one that was closer, but I thought, no, I can't be bothered to go through the 3 month period before they realise that the resting female dog face is actually a misrepresentation of what I really am. And I'd got to that stage with them, so I'm going back to it.
RBF. It's a well-known phrase in my family. Jenna, what are your thoughts?
I have lots, and they're currently all scrambling. I think that it's really hard to avoid caring because we do what we do because we care. And we are often really good at having one specific thing that we ignore, and that's ourselves and our own needs. And I fight so hard for my young people because and I've only recently started to realize this, I'm not just fighting for my young people. I'm not just advocating for my young people to have their voices listened to have space for their voices. I'm fighting for little me, the young person that I was, and to be an adult that I didn't know that I ever needed until I was an adult. And, you know, for me specifically, I often was taught growing up that children should only be seen and not heard. And I took that thoroughly literally, and I barely spoke for most of my childhood. At home, sure. Out and about, not very much. And I absolutely find it devastating that even today we are constantly asking for permission to exist in spaces. We ask for permission for our young people to be able to exist in an education setting. We are asking for permission to have basic fundamental human needs to be met. We are asking for permission for compassion to be offered to us. And we are begging for these little crumbs. And we are constantly told left, right, and center, whether it's for, you know, neurodiverse needs, physical needs, gender. Like, why is it that girls' uniform is and girls wearing a centimeter too short of a skirt is distracting for the boys? What about the girls? What about the young people who aren't boys, who aren't girls, who just want to bloody exist, who just want to learn? What about the kids who get excited and have so many questions? And, you know, it has taken me 30 years to be okay with the fact that I'm excited about asking questions about learning.
Well, I'll tell you something. We're excited about the way that you learn and about who you are as a person, and we care about that person, and we care about the young person that you were. And that really goes for everyone in this room, towards everyone in this room.
And that's what makes this a safe space where we can have these conversations.
Yeah. So on that note, thank you. I think the most beautiful thing that happened here today was how little self-deprecation there was. I honestly anticipated this being a conversation of laughing at how silly and messy and chaotic we are, or how much we struggle to relate, or all of those things. And we are coming. How much we care about each other, care about our students, and care about doing things better is just inspiring. So thank you so much, Rosanna. Thanks, MJ. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Dee. You guys are awesome. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.